In this episode of OG 55, we're talking Rogers the Musical. Yes, Rogers the Musical. We're also talking a little San Fransokyo Square coming to DCA. We have a lot of DCA news today. It's going to be a great time up next on OG 55. Welcome aboard to another episode of OG 55. I am joined by my family, my brothers. We got Mr. Family Man 23, Vash Guy, Mr. Family Man 23. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. You can check out the new podcast I'm part of called A Walk with Walt. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Perfect. And usually Dre does the sound effects to get you in here. So hold on, let me see if I got a little something for you. Oh, here, I got a little lightsaber action. There you go.
That works.
You're officially in. Down below, we got Dr. Dre, producer Dre, the fire marshal, Mr. Vash Sky, host of the Freshly Squeezed show here on the channel. Dre, welcome back, sir.
Hey, happy to be back. A very interesting couple of days prior, but I was fortunate enough to make it back in time for this show, so I am happy about that. If you guys want to know what I'm talking about, well, you got to go over to Theme Park Casual's channel and watch a recent live stream that he did, and you'll get to know a little bit more about our adventures. But I'm sure we'll have shows on here as well. And if you want to go ahead and tune into those shows, well, you got to subscribe to the channel, Orange Grove 55, where we have some amazing shows coming up here, including my own at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. And if you guys want to follow me, you can go do so on Twitter at Vash Sky. Right on there, just go ahead and type it up, and it should pop up, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion.
Yes. All right, let's dive right in. So the first topic today is going to be Rogers the Musical. All right, so this is interesting. So it says here, this is from Marvel.com, Rogers the Musical coming to Disneyland Resort this summer. For anyone out there who has long dreamed of seeing a real-life production of Rogers the Musical, your dreams are about to come true. Starting this summer for a limited time engagement, a short one-act version of Rogers the Musical will debut on the Hyperion stage inside California Adventure. More details will be announced at a later date, but Disney Parks shared a small tease of what's to come when the Avengers step into the spotlight. And here is that small tease. We have Agent Carter walking up to the Hyperion. She's got like the little booklet for the show. She walks in, bam. All right, it's official. All right, so George, I'll start with you, man. So this is interesting. There's been a lot of speculation about what's going to go into the Hyperion. There's been a lot of smoke, a lot of rumors that something's going in there. There was a rumor that it was going to be Hercules. Then we're hearing rumors maybe Marvel. Well, it looks like the Marvel rumors were in fact the case. What are your overall thoughts, opinions on Rogers the Musical coming to the Hyperion?
Well, I think it's kind of funny because when I first got a little taste of this at the D23 Expo, I thought, oh, there's no way that they're going to put this thing in the Hyperion. Well, right. I guess I'm eating some crow there, but but it does make sense that if they were to keep the Hyperion as the Hyperion, but kind of have it forged as it transitions into Marvel, because Avengers Campus is right next to Hollywoodland. And I feel that would be the appropriate route, because I would really love to see Hollywoodland stay, but just get kind of an upgrade, so to speak. So I do love how they kind of balance both out in the Hyperion with Rogers the Musical because of Avengers Campus and Hollywoodland. Now, I do find it interesting that when they made that, I do apologize. There's the hype train.
There it is.
There's Rogers right there. He's coming. He's coming aboard.
All aboard.
But what I find funny in the description that they said it's a limited engagement and it's one act. So this kind of tells me that they're testing the waters with this. And I feel like that this is to see of how fans react to it. And if it's plausible, to the fans and it's a huge success, I have a feeling that it's going to be permanent and we're going to get the full show. And I think that they already have the full show kind of already in set. So they're just giving us a little taste of that. And what better way to do it in the summer? Because that's when you draw the large crowds. You have the families on vacation, kids are out of school, people take time off from work. But they have to be very careful with this because I feel like if they do it as a satire, sort of like a slapsticky type of thing, it can be a little bit diluted for the Hyperion, if you will. I think if they were to kind of go the route based off of what the teaser shows, sort of like that cabaret vaudeville type of 1940s, like of how Captain America was before he became into the current timing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think that would be perfect because you're showcasing Marvel, but yet it's still in that 1930s, 1940s Hollywood theme.
Interesting. Yeah, I was actually talking to Dre about this on the phone a couple of weeks ago about how if the show that goes into the Hyperion ends up being Marvel, that's a big kind of like wink and a nod on the direction of Hollywoodland, right? Which, I mean, we're already seeing more and more Marvel kind of being beta tested in Hollywoodland. Rogers the Musical is the latest example, but even the new show, I think it's on Disney Plus, Marvel Moon Girl or whatever. It's an animated show for young kids. They got the meet and greet over there in Hollywoodland, so they're testing. Disney does this a lot with meet and greets and various things where they want to see what properties do well in certain areas. Heck, we also have that massive Avengers store over by PhilharMagic. So Disney's eyeballing Hollywoodland for something Marvel. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to turn Hollywoodland into like more Avengers Campus necessarily. It can be a mix of both. Remember, these heroes live in our world. So if they maybe go with maybe they spruce up the Hollywood kind of theme, but Marvel is kind of sprinkled in throughout, that makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. In terms of the comedy, I think for me personally, if it's slapsticky and funny, I think it could work kind of like a Billy Hill and the Hillbillies used to work, right? Like at the Golden Horseshoe. It's just all about execution, and we'll see. I mean, but you're right though, George. Like, there's a fine line there.
It's that fine line. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. It can really. It's like a Thor, like the Thor Love and Thunder thing. You go too far.
Yeah.
Right. But Mr. Vast Guy, what are your thoughts, man? Rogers the Musical coming to the Hyperion.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. And yeah, I mean, you could execute it with kind of a satire layer, and obviously that is what is implied with the first appearance of the Rogers the Musical concept as part of Hawkeye, right?
Yep.
But I mean, this is a kind of very meta concept right here. And, the venue of the Hyperion is not like the Golden Horseshoe as it contained Billy Hill and the Hillbillies or the Fantasyland Theater even. I mean, this is a premium venue right here, and it sets a certain expectation, especially when you load into this thing, which I'll get to in a moment. But I was just talking to Theme Park Casual about this, and even he was like, "Ooh, I'm not quite sure. This is quite meta. This is quite what do you want to say? Obscure." Right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people saw Hawkeye, and not a lot of people saw the context in which this was originally played in. Would it be confusing to guests? I'm not sure. Now, it did play very, very well to the D23 Expo crowd, but you have to understand your audience there. That's not necessarily reflective of the California
Normies.
Adventure audience. Now, you do have a disproportionate level of APs there, so that will help significantly. And I do agree with you, George. I think this is a test for certain things to come. The question is how well this is actually going to play. And this is also a one-act thing right here. So it's, what are we assuming? Maybe 20 minutes?
That's what I'm
25
thinking, because if
minutes?
it's one act, I'm thinking like 20, 25 minutes. But do you also feel like Disney's even kind of hesitant of whether or not if it's even going to work? Because that's why I think if they were really confident, we would have got the full show, like, bam, right at the beginning.
That also suggests, how far you can actually take this concept and make it into a full show. I think it might be a showcase of Marvel in the park more than it is Rogers the Musical, because Marvel opens the door to many things if a Marvel concept is even accepted in the first place. So I think that's kind of where they're going here. But you're talking about a venue. What is the capacity of the Hyperion?
Oh gosh,
DCA? I thought it was like, are we talking 3,500, 5,000?
I believe so. I don't have the exact
number.
number.
Know this number, by the way.
I'm not sure.
Actually, here's the thing. I used to too. That's how long it's been. I never even really focused on the Hyperion up until now, because it was like, just unfortunately, it was sitting there like a stale building, But I do find it funny, Dre, that you mentioned about,
it's 1,984. I do apologize.
What is it?
1,984.
Okay. Well, that's still a lot of people to be, held within one showing. And
oh yes,
but I was saying that I do find it interesting that when you say that they have to kind of captivate their audience, and after you said that, it makes me wonder that everyday family that could be coming from Colorado, you might as well just say it, that and if they have, just to say, young girls, which there are girls that are into the Marvel aspect and everything, but just like how that they say, the princesses lean more towards the girls and they find stuff that gears towards boys. Could this essentially be more towards young boys that are into the Marvel characters and not necessarily appeal for young girls? Where
our young boys into musicals. That's true. That this is kind of an interesting thing here. It just in terms of the logistics of it, it's not obviously the obvious move. This is something completely different. Now, obviously, there's things that go along with it. Avengers Campus is right next door. I do agree with you, OG, and George, when you talk about the expansion of Avengers Campus into the Hollywoodland area. That is absolutely something Disney wants to do, right? And I think it's more befitting of a complete redo rather than just kind of a soft overlay like we're getting with San Fransokyo. But that's a whole other story, which we will get into in a moment. But you're talking about very ambitious concepts coming, at least eventually. This is a stepping stone to that, obviously. But the reason I bring up the venue specifically is because, this does hold about 2,000 people. The time it takes to even load this thing. I've seen many Hyperion productions. I've not seen the theater loaded in any time less than 30 minutes. Now, we were just speaking to Do Trust Me Bro, which we did. Sit down with at Disneyland recently, and they were saying that the venue of the Hyperion was actually designed to be loaded in like 15 minutes, and I've never seen it that short.
I haven't either.
I've seen many productions, both Aladdin, Blast, saw the original show, can't remember it now, but Frozen.
Steps in Time, I believe it was called.
Step in Time, yeah, exactly. Steps in Time.
Did you see Frozen?
I've seen all of them.
Did you see Frozen?
I've seen Frozen. Yeah, I've seen Frozen. I saw all versions of it too. I saw the original version as it debuted, I think on opening day actually, which was very interesting. And then I saw it at how it was truncated and so forth. So I've seen a lot of stuff in here. And look, when you load up that theater and it takes time to turn this thing over, like a lot of time, there's a certain expectation that comes with that. There's a certain quality level that you're expecting, and anything less than, I think, a 30-minute show, I think might struggle. And this might be why Disney is emphasizing that it's going to be a a limited time run, just to kind of see how this concept actually plays out, which direction they'll go for a future production. Now, I have heard that a production is in pre-development at this time, and to be honest, you have to look at the problems with the company right now, right? They're looking to make cuts. They're not looking to significantly invest in the parks and all of its aspects, right? So this is a way to fill the venue up with something and get it playing, and to augment the what do you want to say, the attractions that Disney California Adventure has. Because let's be honest, I mean, the Hyperion is a big part of that, and this just gets something in for right now. And if they want to expand it later, they can, or if they want to go in a different direction completely, they can. But I will give props to getting something back in there for right now. I just don't know how well it'll play, to be honest with you.
It's interesting. Yeah, you make a good point. It's kind of a win-win in the sense where it's like it's putting something in the theater. Okay, that's good. It's better than nothing. Yeah, and also it's giving Disney, shout out to Bob Chapek. It's giving Disney the data to kind of see how a Marvel thing works in this space. Now, if this thing is buco successful, then Disney's probably going to look at this space going, okay, we can do other Marvel things in this space, which I actually think Marvel is a very interesting property for the Hyperion, because it doesn't just have to be like Rogers the Musical. It doesn't have to be a musical at all. It can be like a stunt show, like a Bourne stunt show they got going at Universal. There's a lot of potential with this IP. So, if this is a hit, which I really do believe it will be, Diz Twitter is super negative. Okay. Diz Twitter pretty much has something to say about everything. I saw overwhelmingly positive kind of stuff about the announcement of Rogers the Musical. I think that the Diz Twitter group is on board. We'll see what like the magic key holders, more casual key holders and what have you, how they kind of respond to it. I don't know. I think it's gonna be well. Now we'll see if it extends its time in the Hyperion. Like, let's say it's just for the summer, then you start to see them announce like, well, you know what, it's staying until New Year's. Then they're happy with the numbers and what have you. Go ahead, George.
No, I was just going to say that I would hope, in a sense, that if it is successful, as we all do hope it will be, that it would stay a musical in any aspect, shape, or form, because I have seen the Bourne stunt show, and I have been in that type of theater. And the difference between that and the Hyperion is the Hyperion's aesthetics fit a New York's like type of Broadway style theater, where the Bourne theater kind of is more like an auditorium, where it's like flat. There's no multiple layers because they have these humongous sound systems, where they have like the special effects go off at any time, where I feel like those kind of special effects really wouldn't fit right into the Hyperion. But it's Disney. They could do whatever, they make the impossible possible, but just like the aesthetics of the theater, I think that they are more gearing towards just sticking with a musical.
Yeah. I mean, possibly. I could see a stunt show in there. They did have various stunts in Aladdin, for example, right? You had, Aladdin kind of jumping over the crowd to get away from the guards in that scene, right? And then you had the flying carpet, obviously, up there. So they have done some intricate work in the past. Could they push that to another level, featuring a stunt show? I think they could. The question would be then replayability and so forth, and and what demographics you can actually get in there. George, you bring up a good point about little girls and so forth, and who these kind of shows play for. That's all a big question. Ideally, I think a musical would be looked at most fondly by certain people interested in seeing a show at Hyperion. But hey, you know what? OG makes a great point. It's all about execution, right? I think my question. Oh, go ahead.
Well, real quick, I was actually going to say overall too, DCA kind of skews male. I know we're kind of like making huge assumptions here, but if we look at the lands and what it offers, I mean, Cars isn't exactly hot with little girls. I think it's more of a little boy franchise. And then you have Marvel in there, and it's just kind of for me, DCA kind of skews more male anyway than Disneyland, but maybe I'm wrong. But go ahead, Dre.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting conversation. I think there is something there. Maybe Fantasyland is a little bit more girl oriented, whereas various parts of DCA might be a little bit more male driven. I never quite thought of it in those terms, but you do make an interesting point here. I think the broader question for me is the ongoing viability of the Marvel franchise itself, because it has taken a little bit of a hit lately. You have had a little bit of tune out. You have had a little bit of fatigue. We've seen this with the various projects released last year, whether it be Doctor Strange, Thor 4, Black Panther 2, and so forth. They weren't necessarily the most successful films out there, at least when you look at budgets and slate and strength of slate and so forth. But then we've now seen the second weekend performance of Ant-Man Quantumania, and obviously that is, I think that raises some concern. And we see Phase 5 announced, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I think might do pretty well. But then you have Captain America: New World Order, you have Thunderbolts, you have the Marvels, you have Blade, which are all kind of big questions. Deadpool 3 I think is very viable, but I think my question is how the ongoing hunger for Marvel amongst the populace, will it affect Marvel product in the parks and how those things are perceived? I'm honestly not sure. And so this is kind of a very kind of obscure meta thing in the Marvel universe itself. Are people hungry for that specifically amongst a broader audience? This is really quite an interesting question.
Yeah, no, it is. And it could go either way. The Marvel fatigue could affect it or not affect it. Like, I don't really see much of a pullback from general audiences going into Pixar Pier necessarily, because Pixar has also seen kind of a brand, downhill spiral, so to speak, lately. And Pixar Pier is still trucking along.
And
we went to Universal and Waterworld, which was like the biggest flop in history.
That was sold out.
Yeah, and honestly, if I could be very blunt, you guys know me, balls to the wall, that I actually think any kind of franchise right now with Disney is kind of on a spiral downward. Like, even with traditional the Disney animation, so it's almost so it's almost like anything in the Disney brand right now, it's still allocating people to go to the parks, because I think that's where it becomes a psychological thing that they don't really think about. When they go to the park, they're enjoying the ride, they're enjoying the atmosphere, the sights, the sounds, the smells. I think it doesn't really correlate really back to the movies or the franchises per se, because take instance, Cars Land. Cars Land, the films were, the first one did more successful than the second and the third. But as a whole, I mean, if you're comparing to other Pixar films, Cars really wasn't that big of a deal. But when you put Cars Land in the mix with the attractions and the aesthetics of the land itself, it's a popular brand.
Yeah, it all comes down to execution. If the Marvel show in the Hyperion is really fun and gets people just cheering and laughing, it's going to be a hit. If it falls flat, and look, this is, like I said in the beginning, there's a fine line here. If you go too cornball, and look, I'm not a fan of real corny humor. That's why I don't like Thor Ragnarok. I didn't even bother seeing Love and Thunder. I have no desire to see it. There's a fine line here with this. This could be hilarious and a lot of fun, or it could be a cringe fest. It's all about that execution. Dre, I was going to ask you, is this a show that Christopher Lenertz is working on, or is he working on the permanent show coming after this one? Did he say
I
that,
was
or we don't
trying
know?
to determine that, and Lenertz did talk about how the venue has been closed for ever since 2020, right? Suggesting that he is working on the first show out, and not
Okay.
necessarily the second one. So
Be
I
this one then.
believe Lenertz is part of this production. Now he might be part of the future one as
Okay.
well, but from what I understand, he's part of this one. Now, we'll obviously be contacting him just for clarity, but he didn't necessarily distinguish it himself. So if I'm not mistaken, he is working on this. And look, everybody, if everybody listening, we do plan on contacting Lenertz after the debut of this, so that assuming that he did work on it, which I'm very inclined to suggest to say that he did. That we get his thoughts about its production and so forth, its development, in a very similar way that we did with Wondrous Journeys. Which, by the way, I did actually see the projections-only version of it. And I do mean projections-only version. They didn't even have a lot of the other effects that they used to augment the show with, because it was raining. And it's still as emotionally resonant as it was, even with all of those things, which is a sign of a very powerful show. And like you said, OG, it is all about execution. Yeah. I guess when you have these franchises attached to the parks so strongly, and you do, I don't know, you do have maybe missteps with these franchises. Does that affect the parks? It's an interesting conversation. I think broadly speaking, George, I think you're right. I think no. And I think the execution does actually win out. But I've kind of noticed it myself, where maybe you have a certain character featured in a certain place, and it just kind of like, ooh, I don't quite like that, because I don't like that character, right? I won't give you a specific example right now, but let's just say if I if I had my soundboard there, I'd be playing the "Thank you very much" drop right there. And you can kind of assume who I'm talking about right there. Yeah. But it is, I think that is kind of a risk there, is if you're you have your evergreen attractions, right? Like Big Thunder Mountain Railroad or the Matterhorn or Space Mountain. Doesn't necessarily have a theme to any specific franchise. They're kind of franchises onto themselves, and they have lasting power no matter, no matter what happens, because it's not necessarily themed to a franchise that could be associated with it. Whereas you have, like a Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, for example, right? I've heard a lot of people who are like, ooh, I like Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, I just wish it wasn't themed to the sequel trilogy.
Right.
Exclusively. And that kind of diminishes their love for it. It's kind of that kind of thing. It's a very interesting thing. I know we're getting off in the weeds here. I think Rogers the Musical, I think it's a very interesting idea, and we'll have to kind of see how it actually ends up performing.
I agree. I think it could go either really well or
either way.
really bad.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, honestly, it's kind of refreshing to get something really, really, really different, right? And look, I am the fairy tale guy. I've made the case so many times that Disney Animation should really lean into fairy tales and be the storybook studio that it was really, that it was from the beginning, really, is what that studio was, right? So I'm a fairy tale guy. I mean, that's what got me into Disney in general, was that those Renaissance era films and what have you. But it is kind of refreshing to see something go in there that's like, okay, this is unique, right? Because there were rumors it was going to be Hercules, and that would have been awesome. But again, that's like another Aladdin or another Frozen. It's just an adaptation of an animated film, and while it could be great, it's kind of like we've been there, done that a little bit, Like this Rogers thing is totally, totally different. We have not been in this direction at all, and new territory, right? So it's kind of exciting. So we'll see. I don't know, all about execution. But with Christopher Lenertz on it, I know the music will at least be very good. So
yeah, I mean, if there's one guy that could pull this off,
It's him.
You know, we're. I think we're in good hands. The best hands that we could possibly be in, right? I can't guarantee that it'll be successful, but we're in the best hands we could possibly be in.
Absolutely. So let's pivot now to our next topic, which is Pacific Wharf is getting a retheme to San Fransokyo Square. Very interesting. This news was announced at D23. There was some concept art, which we'll share. There was some updated art recently. A lot of interesting stuff going on over here. George, I'll start with you. What are your overall thoughts on this kind of like this modest kind of retheme of this basically food court?
Well, it's kind of funny. Like, aside from everyone getting all hyped up about Josh D'Amaro's what if or what could happen, this is actually one of the things that was confirmed at the expo that I actually was excited about compared to anything else, believe it or not. Because I mean, I've been around the wharf at times, and it does give that, traditional San Francisco type of vibe, because the park was designed to be, all attributes of the state of California, where I do love now, because Disney now is, moving towards heavy IP, that it kind of gives off this kind of hybrid type of thing of San Fransokyo that's in Big Hero 6, and not too much change that they have to actually do as far as with the layout of the land itself. So it's pretty much just, the change of the bridge, of which we're looking at here, to kind of put you in through that entrance. And then, of course, just kind of not necessarily changing the buildings, but just kind of like retheming them to be San Fransokyo. And I'm actually very curious to see, in a very good way, to kind of have that Asian culture in mixed with that hybrid of San Francisco, maybe offering different food venues, that maybe play into the film itself. And I'm excited about it. I think it's a nice little subtle touch that'll be put into DCA, and I'm very curious to see how it will turn out.
Well, and this is the direction of the park. And a lot of people, and I've made so many videos on this, and I keep seeing it like on Twitter and stuff. Oh, well, DCA is not about California anymore. DCA is still about California. DCA, the lands are very much at their core California. Like right here, you have a wharf, you got a pier, you got Hollywood, Los Angeles, Route 66. These are very California things. The only difference now is they're taking Disney IP. So you have, Pixar cars, or you have, Walt Disney when he arrived in Los Angeles. I know he's technically not an IP, but he kind of is. You have all these kind of Disney IPs like overlaid over these very California locations, right? So bringing San Fransokyo into the fold is very much in line with that new direction for DCA. It's very California. Look, it's very much inspired by San Francisco. You can see here with the very Golden Gate Bridge looking, design and what have you. It's still reminiscent and very much inspired by a California city, but it even adds a little more to that because it's got that Asian flair to it. And look, we have a huge Asian population here in California. It's a huge part of the culture here in California. So that also works with the California theme. I'm on board with it. Like, look, Pacific Wharf was already themed basically to a San Francisco area kind of wharf, right? It was already 80% there. And now they're just putting some details in here to kind of go all the way with the Big Hero 6 stuff to really turn it into San Fransokyo. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be pretty cool. And look, here's the other thing too that I think is pretty exciting. Then I'll take it to Dre. But the other thing too is this area has always just been a food court. Ever since DCA opened, it's just been a food court. Now we're going to get a Baymax meet and greet with, I think, Hiro Hamada and him as well. So it's becoming, I know it's not like a huge offering. I'm not saying it's like massive or anything, but at least this area is now becoming a little more than just like a food court. And there's something else there to offer families with that meet and greet and what have you. I think it's an exciting change. Look, I'm not expecting to go in here and be blown away. This is a modest transformation. This is not Galaxy's Edge. This isn't really even Avengers Campus. It's a modest overlay. And I think, fans need to go in there with a little bit of that expectation in check. But Dre, go ahead, brother. What are your overall thoughts on San Fransokyo Square coming to DCA?
Yeah, it's always been interesting because there's multiple things playing out here. One is the inclusion of IP for IP's sake, or at least that's the characterization as brought forth by some people within the community. There's also the ongoing kind of thing between the California Venture and the relationship with California and how California it is and so forth. And I try to explain to people, look, this isn't necessarily this isn't a literal interpretation of California like what was intended by the designers of DCA back in 2001, right? This is California through Disneyland.
Right.
And some people are, I guess this comes down to execution as well. Some people are very entranced by this, like Buena Vista Street, for example. Buena Vista Street, as exists, there was no literal definition or literal place like that to take inspiration from. And recreate. This is not like a New Orleans Square, for example. This is an interpretation of 1930s, 1920s Los Angeles as done by Disney, right? And I think it works really, really well. Cars Land obviously has to do a lot with California in the form of Route 66 and just general culture itself. And yes, that you are transporting the world of Radiator Springs to California in a very direct way, but I think it does work very, very well. And there are some who argue, well, that's Arizona, not California. Look, that's a very small minority. I think everybody kind of gets it, and everybody goes along with it just fine. I think it's the kind of the I guess this mentality, I think, kind of changed with Pixar Pier, because I think Pixar Pier was seen as, maybe cheap, rushed. I don't know. It's very Chapek era in it, and so it always has that baggage, unfortunately, with it. And I think there were aspects of Pixar Pier that really, really worked well. The entrance, for example, and I think Tom Corliss actually did say some stuff about this, where like the entrance to the fair Mickey's Fun Wheel, or now it's Pixar Pal Around, was very, very good, right? And then you had that adjacent facade there that used to be the stage for the band. That was done very, very well. What is it? Lamplight Lounge. Just incredible. Absolutely one of the best venues ever. I mean, it really does work quite well. But then you have some other things that weren't so popular, right? The Incredibles neighborhood. I don't think that was necessarily very well embraced. Jesse's Roundup and stuff. People have mixed feelings about that. So, And I think it's the quality of the execution more than anything else that people have a problem with, and they kind of see San Fransokyo as almost a reflection of that, as almost like we're following in those same footsteps. Look, I think Pixar, the Pacific Wharf was not at the same, it wasn't in the same state that the pier started out as, right? I think it was a little bit more transportative. I think it was done a little bit better, and to that end, not a lot has to be done with it in order to transport you to San Fransokyo, which is partially why they're not doing much at all to do that.
Yeah,
now,
you don't
again,
need to do much.
Yeah, again, it's an economic overlay, right? but at the same time, there really wasn't that much that needed to be done. My kind of issues with it kind of stem from, well, one, at the image that you're looking right now, it's a little bit different than the image that they included at the initial D23 presentation. You can see that it's, I think the bridge towers aren't so extended as they are. They actually have four cross members, whereas now we only have 3. So it just kind of looks a little bit wonky to me, and a little bit the scale is a little bit different than what was alluded to. But going back to what they actually premiered, this kind of stuff, it looks pretty light, maybe a little bit too light. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a transformation process actually take place. But again, though, it wasn't in a terrible state. I think I agree with you, OG. This place was always just kind of a food court, and wow, I mean, initially this place was deader than. This place was dead when it initially debuted. Nobody went here to eat, which was really unfortunate. And now with Carsland, now that is one of the pass-throughs for one of the best parts of Carsland, and so that gave this area new life and new energy. But I think it always was like, ooh, maybe more could be done here, and this is kind of that answer to that. And there are some pieces of artwork which actually look pretty good.
Yeah,
like
that looks
this,
cool.
This looks really awesome. Now it's Twilight and everything like that. We'll see how this actually plays in the day, but I think this is done very, very well. It's going to add even more venues to this area. Which is interesting. I know they're getting rid of the beer cart, and this kind of makes up for that. But now you have kind of a standalone, or I should say, a kind of built-in facility for that. So that'll be good. I'm sure the capacity will have increased in this area. I think the other question for me is what stays, what goes. They're saying right now that all of this stuff is staying, but we've heard some rumors and talk that. Maybe not everything that's included in Pacific Wharf right now will make the transformation ultimately with San Fransokyo.
I don't think everything will stay, because I think one of the reasons why Disney is doing this is because they see a gold mine with the food opportunities, with boba and the cute little bao buns with like Baymax, with a Baymax face on it and what have you. And aside from the Lucky Fortune Cookery, there's not really a whole lot of Asian places where they can really offer that stuff. So I would bet, and maybe that Rita Margarita place maybe gets rethemed to something a little more on brand, right? A little more, from the movie or something, or maybe Ghirardelli chocolate leaves and becomes something else. I don't think everything is staying. I think the only thing that was really confirmed to stay was that Cochina Mexican, is that what it's called? Cocina? I think.
I think it's Cochina Cucamonga or Cocina Cucamonga.
Cocina, yeah, Cucamonga. I think that was the only one that was actually confirmed to stay, if I'm not mistaken. I think everything else. Now, Lucky Fortune Cookery, I think that'll probably stay because it fits in with the Asian theme. But the margarita thing, I don't know. Ghirardelli's, I'm also not so sure. So it'll be very, very interesting. But Disney wants to look. There's a mint here to be made. I'm telling you, with Baymax bao buns, various boba drinks you can do. Look at all the great stuff they have in Tokyo Disney Resort. Very Asian inspired Disney foods. You can import some of that stuff over if you wanted to. I'm telling you, and that's a bit. People keep saying, "Oh, well, why would they retheme it to Big Hero 6?" That's why. Yeah, follow the money. I'm telling you right now, that's why.
All the specialty treats and drinks that they could be selling on that's a gold mine. Disney's sitting on it.
It's a gold mine. It's an absolute gold mine. And then also it connects to the Lunar New Year stuff. Now, I don't believe Japan celebrates Lunar New Year. It's China, Vietnam, and I think there's another country. I think Korea does as well. But I think that you can still sort of tie that into the Lunar New Year thing, kind of have like a permanent area to be like the heart of that whole celebration. So we'll see. But go ahead, Dre. I'm sorry, brother.
No, you're good. You're good. With the Lunar New Year thing, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. Like, Japan and China aren't really the best bedfellows.
Oh yeah.
and would that be offensive to do it? I'm not sure. I have to I gotta have some conversations with some people and figure this out because
Well, if you're Japanese or Chinese and you're watching this, comment down below. Do you find it offensive? Because we would love to know. That's interesting, Dre.
Why would you do that, OG? They're not representatives of their entire culture. Okay, no. Yeah, please, no, please. If you are members of the Asian community, please let us know because I've heard differing reports on this. It's kind of strange, but I do agree with you, OG. You could have this be the kind of home for Lunar New Year. I do think they want to push that more towards the front of the park. We saw a big marquee this year, just past Buena Vista Street, highlighting the Lunar New Year celebrations for this year. So I do think they want to lean into that a little bit more. I zoomed in on this first piece of concept artwork, and I know this is a little bit out of date, but you can see right here the Lucky Cat Cafe is featured there instead of the current right now the Bodine Factory. The bread. What is it? The bread company who operates this right now. And Lucky Cafe was famously included in Big Hero 6. So it seems like they did have, at least at one time or another, and maybe still could be, I'm not sure, the idea of replacing some of these venues with some other things that were more themed to Big Hero 6 itself. Now, from my vantage point, I think the Lucky Fortune Cookery was like one of the weaker options in here, and so I would start there, and maybe do some work on some of this stuff because Bodine was very successful. Cucina Cucamonga was very successful. And I would think that Ghirardelli was as well, but we're hearing that maybe maybe the relationship between Ghirardelli and Disney as it exists in California Adventure specifically, maybe that might be getting changed here momentarily. So this is something to kind of watch. I think Tom Corliss was suggesting that this might be like a phase 1, and maybe we get a slow transition more into the San Fransokyo kind of theme with the venues following this whole thing. So we're gonna have to see, but I think it's done well enough. I don't get quite the hate or the outrage for it. I really don't. This was an unthemed portion of Disney California Adventure. This was nobody's favorite by any means, and I think there was always potential here. And I think a light or modest overlay was all it needed, honestly.
And it doesn't stray too far from the original theme. I mean, it's already themed to a Northern California wharf. It's not like, at least with Pixar Pier, it was like we're going from what was supposed to be like a 1930s kind of inspired boardwalk pier thing. Now we're going to overlay like this very modern CGI computer animated studio on top of that. It was just like, whoa, okay, this is a complete departure from what we had. This isn't. This is like, okay, we're already like 80% there. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead, George. I'm sorry, brother.
Oh, no, you're good. The only thing that kind of throws me off just a little bit, and it may look different in person once this is fully completed, but I'm not a fan of the Baymax heads as the lanterns. No, I'm not, because it feels like it's too much of a gimmick.
Does it feel more like decorating as opposed to theming? Is that what you're saying?
It feels like I would rather it be more original to how they were, of how it actually looked in the film. So if you were to go into the film of San Fransokyo, you didn't see a whole bunch of Baymax heads, Yeah. So it seems like it's a cheap gimmick that if you were to hang up like streamers at a birthday party, but that's me nitpicking. It may look great in person. That's just my only thing. No, I love how they have the original like Asian lanterns spread out like that. I really do enjoy. But a question for you fellas, because I don't really know too much as far as with the California aspect, but you had mentioned obviously Ghirardelli chocolate is in there. Could they eventually move that into Downtown Disney? Because I know Ghirardelli chocolate is in Disney Springs at Walt Disney World.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Idea. I kind of like that.
Yep. Friend of the channel, Marty, our good friend Marty, we were talking about Ghirardelli and the potential of like, is it staying or going? And yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence with it. I'm not so sure that's staying. I'm really
because
not.
I really feel like it would benefit more in Downtown Disney because it is very popular in Disney Springs at Walt Disney World.
Yeah,
And
and
Disney knows that, and they're gonna, yeah. Go ahead, Jay.
it's pretty pop. I mean, in the summer, Ghirardelli's out the door. I mean, it's up there in terms of demand. But you make an interesting point, George. It's not the its location is I think it would benefit more by being out in Downtown Disney because you can get just a wider audience. You're not just limiting it to in theme park guests, which I mean, if you don't have a park hopper and you're at Disneyland, you still can't get it, right? It's like you're limited to just DCA, whereas you can really open the doors up there. Hey, it's an interesting point. I'm not quite sure. We haven't heard much about Downtown Disney, unfortunately, in terms of it's all of its proprietors, but we'll see.
Actually, if you were to actually look at all of DCA's offerings, like you have Lamplight Lounge, you have some of the other places that it's now going to be transformed into San Fransokyo. I don't really think like comparing that to Ghirardelli in the parks as you fellas have mentioned, I don't think it's really a home run hit. That if I had to pick, if I'm in DCA, Lamplight Lounge or Ghirardelli Chocolate, I'm going for Lamplight Lounge.
Right.
So I think if it was to be placed in Downtown Disney, as you had mentioned, that it's an overall encompass of just people that may come after work or on the weekends, and you don't need a ticket to get into that. As I said, it works very well in Disney Springs.
Yeah, I mean it's not a yeah. It's a really interesting point. I will say, not a restaurant, it's a soda fountain, but I get you. It's a place that you go casually, and it's right now.
Let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. If I had to spend the time, I'd spend the time at Lamplight Lounge than Ghirardelli Chocolate.
Now, Dre, this is interesting. If you could zoom in on that Lucky Cat area again, please.
Sure.
Because this is interesting. So this is the old. There you go. Perfect. So this is the old concept art from D23. The new concept art doesn't really have this level of detail, but it's interesting because in the press release, they actually mention this like kind of floating turbine, that thing right there. I think that's what they're talking about in the press release, is that turbine, that giant fish. What's interesting, because they mentioned it in the press release just from a few days ago, but it's not shown in the new art. So I don't really know. I wouldn't, as fans, I wouldn't get too mentally married to what we're seeing in the new art. Correct, because I don't think everything is represented in there.
Absolutely. And Dre, would you be able to zoom in on the new art just to get a little bit of a...
Oh, yeah.
New art is a different place. So you can see Bodine. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor? Well, on the very... This art right here is representing the Bodine factory and everything to the east, right? Whereas this is a little bit more western and Kachina Cucamonga. Yeah. So it's a little bit different placement, but let me see if I can
zoom in a little bit.
Zoom in here a little bit.
Let's see.
These also aren't the highest res photos available.
Yeah, they're super vague on purpose, too,
Yeah.
That's about it.
That's about it of this area. The turbine is missing from this artwork. Can you see that?
Yeah. Well, it's but it's a different area though. You said, right? So it's
yes, but you should see it here. Right? It should be. This is on the
where
very edge.
the turbine is positioned here. You can kind of see the background of Radiator Springs Racers.
Right.
So, but you should see it. You should see it in between those buildings, and it's just not represented there at all. Like you should be able to visually identify it here.
Yeah, now that's interesting. So it's weird, right? So they show the turbine in the old art. They don't show the turbine in the new art, but they mention the turbine in the press release. So I don't know. Are we getting it? Are we not? I don't know.
Well, no, I think we are. The fact that you see this, it's actually, you know where it is? Right
I thought it was in
now,
between Cars Land and the wharf. What isn't that where the boating
That's
is?
where I thought it was.
Right.
so the turbine, it looks like it's attached to the building that serves margaritas right now.
Oh, you're right. Can you zoom in a little more, Dre, or no?
On
That about
this,
it?
yes, I can.
So that is interesting because
See that?
you're right. It
Oh,
is
yeah.
attached to that. So that kind of plays to
And
my
this
theory that the
building is represented right here, right there.
interesting.
I wonder, maybe, do you think that they're just repositioning it somewhere else and maybe not
Could be.
where the
Could be. I mean,
original?
we now, after watching the a certain Frog Princess project across the Esplanade, we know that these projects, they develop over time.
Yeah.
Hell, probably the turbine's going to be a repurposed balloon from Kite Tails.
There you go.
Oh,
You never
there you
know.
go.
You never know.
That's an
So it's
interesting
interesting. I think what's also surprising to me is that this is a very modest, and we all agree on this. It's a very modest overlay, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
We were hearing rumors, Dre, that this was gonna get knocked out in a month, right? This whole thing, and like
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not opening till summer. That's a little lengthier than I expected. Now, if you remember, it took Mission Breakout 6 months. 6 to 7 months. It was like from January and opened like in May or June.
Mhm.
And it's like this thing is almost like maybe not quite as long, but close. Like, so I think it's not going to be highly themed. I'm not saying that, but I think it might be a little more involved than fans think it is. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm
Might
saying.
be, yeah. Or unless they're just spreading out capital investment across quarters or whatever. Hopefully they're not. But no, I think you might be right, OG. This seems to be a little bit more involved than we had originally anticipated.
Yeah, because the bridge is already like they're like full steam ahead with that. They've already got it painted right now. I mean,
Yep,
I can't
yep,
imagine
they
that
do.
thing taking. I mean, in a month, that thing is probably going to be up. So
They
where's
do.
all the work going now? It's interesting, Dre. If you can go to the Baymax meet and greet shot real quick.
Yes.
What's interesting about that shot is I'll show you guys. Okay, so this shot's interesting because the little door that he's coming out of is not being used right now. That's where the beer truck is, right in front of that. So they're actually opening the building up behind it for guests. That's never been
Yes.
open to guests before. I'm assuming it's probably some storage area for the beer truck right now.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's storage, back of house. There's something there that they're now clearing out for this. So we get a whole new venue,
Which is
potentially. So which is cool.
Which is cool and might be part of the reason why we're seeing the extended kind of, it's taking them like, till summer to do it. Maybe I'm sure the inside of that building isn't show ready right now, being that it was probably used for storage or what have you for the longest time. So that's probably going to be a pretty extensive thing they got to do in there.
You also have to remember that all these venues are going to be open while this is all taking place.
Oh, that's true.
So
Well, in the meantime,
it
Baymax is
limits
getting his drink
how
on.
long you can actually do these things. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, when in the meantime, Baymax is getting his drink on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know what else is interesting too? It's like the little details. You see the very Asian inspired lanterns.
Yes.
And it looks like Japanese writing, and it might be, but what I think it is San Fransokyo Square. Do you see the SFS?
Ah, I see.
Yes, I do.
see.
Yeah, now that after you said it.
That's kind of cool. I just
Good
noticed
little
that.
detail right there. I like
Now,
it.
is the water refilled up below the
No.
bridge to the entrance? No, still not.
Not
Okay.
at all. So they're still working. They have just poured the footings or the foundational footings for the actual towers themselves. So
Now,
that
Dre-
pour has just completed it, but they still have to build off from that. Go ahead, OG.
Now, Dre, you mentioned, I think it was on the phone, you mentioned you had concerns with like sightline issues in regards to this. You want to discuss that?
Yeah. So there's a great shot of Paradise Pier, especially from the adjacent venue. Is it Wine Country Trattoria? I think is what it, at least what it was before. It's the nearby winery restaurant, and then you have the AP Lounge up top. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
It's this venue. Even in this concept artwork, you can actually see that venue in the far left of frame. There's a great image of the pier from that area, and as you're walking along this main walkway here, and now you're gonna have these towers in between that. And so, is it going to look cluttered? Is it going to look, what is it, unsightly? I'm not sure. Also, too, for you eagle-eyed viewers, again, I don't know if we should be taking the concept artwork super literally, as OG actually explained, and rightfully so. But you see the number of lights here on the towers themselves. And then you can actually see, let's see, not that one. It's this one right here. There's a whole lot more light. Well, there was in one of the pieces of concept art. Let me see if I can find
and that's why the art has fluctuated on this stuff so much with this retheme. That's why I'm not going too far into the details, because I think that a lot of this is going to change.
I do think so. I do think so. But it's very interesting how the towers have changed. As prominently as they have. I just think this is fascinating, how this is actually developing.
Well, and sightline issues, you make a great point. Like, because there's a lot of sightline issues aren't just like one thing. It can mean many things. Like, for example, like, okay, will the sightline issues take me out of the park's theme? No, it's fine. You see the Golden Gate looking bridge in front of a pier, that's still very California, right? So in terms of that, it's not a sightline issue, in my opinion. But you bring up a great point, Ray. It's not about pulling you out of the theme. It's about the obstruction of the pier. So it's more like it's just in the way, not necessarily like, well, this is like taking me out of the atmosphere, So that's an interesting point that you made there. That's very interesting.
What's also interesting is what's old is new again.
Yeah.
So it harkens back to a time when, well, DCA actually did have a legitimate Golden Gate Bridge included in it.
Well, yeah, and I did not like that bridge. I thought it was god awful because I don't know. It was just the way it was like on the monorail beam. It was so gimmicky, but it really does though. Like if you look at like a park theme to California, right? It does seem a little weird that right now we have zero representation of that bridge. Now I know the San Fransokyo isn't like the real bridge, but that was kind of odd to me how iconic that bridge is, and there's nothing in that park to represent that at all. So it's kind of nice to have some sort of version of it in a California park. It kind of makes sense, So we'll see. I hope it looks better than this one, though.
Like I said, I guess the Hyperion Bridge is a very close proximity to the actual Hyperion Bridge that exists right now. Actually, you can actually go next to the old Hyperion Studio site and drive across that Hyperion, I think, Avenue, and then actually see it, see the architectural features that inspired Buena Vista Street's interpretation. So I guess you do have some literal inspiration which to draw from, and now you're going to get kind of a semi-reflection of that in San Fransokyo. So I guess you're right, OG, from that perspective. You do have some representation of some of these iconic landmarks inside DCA, and that probably is a good thing. It takes it back closer to the original intention for DCA, which was it's supposed to be a California adventure by Disney.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this whole thing pans out. Every overlay is not the same. A lot of fans need to realize that like it's kind of a case by case thing. Like Mission Breakout worked really well, right? But Pixar Pier, not so much. This one, jury's still out on it. But just because it's an overlay doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good either. So we got to wait and see. I think the art, though, for this particular project has been all over the map. Like we're seeing like with stuff added, taken away. I think it's still very much in flux.
Yes.
So who knows what we're going to end up with, But it's interesting. It is. I to be honest though, and I'm excited for this. Cool. It's a nice little thing DCA is getting. But I will have to say, we have our friends, the Be Fair to Florida folks, right? I gotta say, even in California, DCA, which is in Anaheim Park, gets the shaft constantly, right? And I advocate for this park all the time because I think there's so much potential here with this park. I'm thirsty though for something of real substance in this park. I want them to give us more detail on that multiverse attraction. I want something to really sink my teeth into, whether it be a Hollywoodland renovation, a Avengers Campus expansion, a multiverse thing. I just want something big. It's been too long.
Every time I walk through DCA, I kind of have that same frustration when I walk in through Disney's Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World, because I feel like both parks, as you had mentioned, OG, does have the potential, but it's just lacking a overall structure of the park, of the park's identity, where yes, it does proclaim to the state of California for DCA, and then Hollywood Studios, I don't even know really what you would call that, because it's not a studios anymore, so I don't even know really what you would call that.
Well, it's kind of like Universal Studios Hollywood. Like they're both very similar parks where they're about movie making, but they're not. They're like going through that weird in between thing right now,
Yeah. So, but I'm with you. I feel like for DCA and Hollywood Studios, I would love to see something, and I know that they attempted to do it with Toy Story Land, they attempted to do it with Galaxy's Edge, but I'm still hungry for something that Hollywood Studios is just going to get a slam bang hit home run. And the last that I have seen out of DCA, for me anyways, was Buena Vista Street and Cars Land.
Oh yeah,
that was a slam dunk right there.
Yeah, I mean, the park has potential. You can do Hollywoodland in like a 1940s theme and have like a Captain America e-ticket in there. But you can keep Hollywood, like the theme Hollywood, so you can keep your red car trolley and all that, right? So you can kind of have the best of both worlds. There's creative ways and solutions to this stuff.
You have like those empty backlot buildings, and then you have Monsters Inc. Mike and Sully to the Rescue, which is a Pixar themed attraction, and it's all the way over there, and you have Pixar Pier on the other side. It's like
well, we have to acknowledge the reason why they haven't done anything with that is because if you develop that right now, you'll always be stuck with that. And if you were to annex the bus loading zone next door, now what do you do?
What do you do?
You have to have kind of a long range plan. Unfortunately, that's really kind of tied up that area. Obviously, it is ripe for development. But it's just, you have the city of Anaheim to work with, and you have to, figure out that parking situation. You have to figure out a place for that.
And the leeches. I mean, the businesses on Harbor Boulevard, right? I mean, you gotta, And we actually did a great show the other day with Jay Shear, and he was talking. He stayed at the Hojo, and I mean, they're getting real. These businesses on that street are getting real, like. Car salesman-y, right?
Yes.
But remember, they would have the business without Disneyland there.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
Everybody woke up to that reality, now didn't they, recently? But no, look, I mean, DCA is it's beaming with potential. But right now, it's just, I mean, you only have so many CapEx dollars to go around. Where are you going to put that investment? That's why I'm still kind of bullish on Avatar, right? You have now it's the second film has eclipsed I think it's just about $2.3 billion at this point.
Yeah.
The original 2.7, 2.8. You're talking about a $5 billion franchise easily, and that's only off of 2 films. It's made more money with 2 films than Star Wars has with 5. So it's an incredible accomplishment.
It's crazy.
And we have 3 more in the can right here. This is still why I'm like, okay, well, if you're limited in investment but you still want to have a big project, what better place to go than with the Avatar franchise as it relates to Disneyland? But that's also what limits DCA, because it's like Avatar. I mean, DCA would very much benefit from an Avatar, but does it fit? Does it fit the California theme? I don't think there's a way to even make that work. So that brings us to another discussion, and we can. It doesn't have to be very long, but do you think there's a time in which Disney kind of looks at DCA and goes, ooh, do we drop the California theme? Do we, in order to open the potential up for this park, and that way we can include all kinds of things? I think Sam Carter on Twitter brought this up. Could you have it be Disney's cinematic kingdom? That way you can still keep the DCA moniker, but now you've opened it up to more possibility. Let's say I understand that people are kind of angry with DCA being the IP dumping ground, but a lot of these things are still rooted in California.
Well, IP dumping grounds are big business. Look at Universal. No,
that's true, right? I think that's it, right?
No. But in all seriousness, though, I actually, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on that because I'm like, okay, so we have. I'm kind of torn on that because actually, I kind of like this new direction they're going in with the California locations, but kind of using the Disney story to kind of tell that California story, so to speak. I kind of like that. I don't know. I think that like if you start to go down the road of it being a Hollywood park, it's a little generic. There's so many of those,
Well, I wonder if you could still keep the title Disney California Adventure, but it would just mean in a different way than you would originally interpret. For instance,
that's interesting.
The title of it was in an original, you're living on a California adventure. But if you just kind of look at it as a bigger scope as Disney California Adventure, where it's not you're necessarily having an adventure in California, but it's an adventure park that's set based inside the state of California, no matter what the overall theme is.
But is that a little bit too esoteric, though? Is it a little bit too confusing to guests?
It might be.
You gotta understand. You gotta play that family in Colorado, right? We might get it, but it might play out like, let's say, Fantasyland Dark Ride, where you're supposed to be the character.
Well, and think about this too. Okay, so Hollywood Studios, they changed the name from Disney MGM because they had a licensing agreement with MGM, so they had to. They were kind of forced into that. But remember, there were rumors that it was even going to change from Hollywood Studios to something else, and they didn't do.
And they had the title. They still haven't released what that was, but they had the title set in place.
Right, they were going to change that theme. So the track record for them actually changing names to parks is not great. I mean, Disney MGM, again, they're like the exception because it had another company's name on the sign. They kind of had to. They don't really have to with DCA. That's the thing, So I don't think they will.
But they have, right? So it used to be Disney's California Adventure.
That's true. They took the S.
Disney California Adventure, which is very fascinating. So this has happened before. It's just very subtle, obviously, but California is still very much in the name. I do agree with you. The record is spotty when it comes to names. Sometimes it works out. Euro Disneyland, right? And Disneyland Paris, I think, is more appropriate. But it's just interesting because I think there might be a time that comes. I'm not talking like not recently, but or certainly not in the near future, but maybe later on, 20, 30 years, and it's like, maybe we break out of this. I could see a world in which that exists, especially with, Disneyland Forward potentially opening up the possibility for expansion near Pixar Place Hotel. I could see them kind of deviating a little bit. But I guess we'll have to see. They're not at that stage yet, and I think I agree with you, OG. I think for the most part, you do have a consistent California story. Some odd fits like Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, right? I think and they try to say, well, it was transported. I don't know. I don't know if that necessarily becomes clear to everybody riding that attraction, but people love that attraction, and a very small percentage of guests actually look for, actually acknowledge those contradictions or those conflicts, right?
Well, and it makes sense within the context of like Avengers Campus now, which actually I forgot to mention. Avengers Campus is very much inspired by Silicon Valley. If you Google ironically, if you Google the Google campus in Northern California, the tile work and the aesthetics of the buildings are almost identical to Avengers campus. So even that is very much kind of a California.
And there are further references to California car culture, right? With the Web Slingers building. It was supposed to be Stark Industries, I think, auto manufacturing plant, right?
Yes.
So, like, there's still, it's still very much rooted in California, I think. I know it's not abundantly obvious, but it is there. I just think, there are Guardians. It's a little bit of a stretch. It's just a little bit of a stretch.
That's a really weird backstory. Joe Rohde's a maniac. I mean, he came up with the craziest thing with that. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. You're right. I mean, that's like, it's out of this world, literally.
It is, but look, it's a great attraction, and it's it's consistently, without Radiator Springs Racers, I think even in the rain, I think that attraction was up to 80 minutes when I looked at it on the on the wait time board.
Wow.
Obviously, there's a lot that goes in with that, but it's still extremely popular. It's still a must do. I think, George, every single time you go out to California, I think you have to at least ride Guardians at least once, maybe twice. Right, because it is so unique, even though Tower of Terror exists on the other coast, right? So, and to me, when you look at the California theme, I think, if we just got rid of the California theme, we could open this park up to all kinds of development and have attractions like Guardians, where it's extremely popular and people really like it. So. But I agree with you also, OG, that it's like, I really like the California theme. I like what I like. DCA 1.0 didn't work at all, but there were aspects of it that did, and they just needed a little bit more quality added to them, right? A little bit more money applied to them, and we saw that beautifully with the Cars Land and Buena Vista Street, and I hope for more expansions like that. But you do come up to a limit at a certain point, and I think the company might acknowledge that in the future.
It's interesting, and then we're going to wrap it up. But I want to bring up one thing, and we're gonna do a big video on this whole Reedy Creek thing, that the news from today, the signing. It's official now. DeSantis signed it. It's Reedy Creek is gone basically. But I wanted to ask you guys, because there was a tweet by Stephen Dirk, a friend of the channel, where he said, because look, I mean, Florida has had all the advantages in the world when it comes to getting stuff built. They don't have to answer to anybody over there, and they got endless land, right? With this whole thing with Reedy Creek being dissolved, and there's now this oversight board and what have you, it might not be as bad as California and Anaheim with the red tape necessarily, but never before has Anaheim and Orlando been this close in regards to that, right? Now, they've inserted quite a bit of red tape now in this whole equation in Florida, and we don't know how bad that's going to get necessarily. We have to wait and see with that, because they could really give Disney a hard time if they wanted to. But here's my question, and we're not going to dive too much into this. I just want to kind of touch upon this one little thing. Do you think that the added red tape in Florida is going to, because Stephen Dirk touched upon this, is going to incentivize Disney to sort of look towards Anaheim and go, well, let's go ahead and focus on like Disneyland Forward and what have you. I mean, if we're going to have drama on both coasts, let's go with the one that's a little less hostile right now. What do you think about that, George? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think it's kind of like,
I think, actually, believe it or not, and I could be in the minority of this, I think this will kind of give Disney an open mindset to maybe consider being a little more creative with Walt Disney World. Because, I mean, let's face it, lately, all they've been doing, yes, Walt had touched upon this many times when he bought up the land. We have something that we didn't have in Anaheim, and that's the blessing of size. There's enough land here to fill all the imagination and dreams and projects, but yet right now Disney isn't utilizing that notion. It's they're taking stuff out and replacing it. So I wonder now if they were kind of relying on their laurels a little bit to say, oh, well, we have this land here, we'll get to it when we get to it. But now that they have some restriction, and now that they're kind of on that same base with Anaheim, it may allow them to then think outside of the box. Hopefully it won't be too big of an issue for them to get projects greenlit or what have you. But I think maybe then would be the time to say, you know what, when we can get them greenlit, let's utilize that notion. Let's utilize this land. Let's do something with it. And I think that's going to be Disney's approach utilizing for Walt Disney World. However, to your question, OG, I feel like that if it is going to if it may take time for things to kind of simmer down and kind of rework itself, you know, once this gets put into notion, and all eyes might be on Anaheim, that if they can convince the council, the Anaheim council, that, you know what, let's kind of work on this Disneyland Forward, because we all know Disneyland Forward is moving forward, then that might be the first step before then looking back at Florida.
Yeah, and the FBI thing fizzled out. I don't think Disney's going to be implicated. It's been far too long now, so that's kind of water under the bridge. So we'll see. But Dre, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think this Florida thing sort of puts more of a focus on Anaheim, or not really? I mean, every other Disney resort in the world has to kind of work around the parameters of the local government, right? I mean, look at the Chinese parks. Look what they had to go through, and they still managed to expand. They were getting a beautiful frozen area in Hong Kong Disneyland, and so maybe the red tape doesn't.
Shanghai.
And the what? I'm sorry.
Zootopia area in Shanghai.
Exactly. So maybe Disney doesn't really care about the red tape. But what are your thoughts, brother?
Well, with the Chinese parks, you have to understand that there is China has skin in the game, right? So because it's a partial ownership stake, so it's there's an incentive for them to expand in that way. Whereas you would think that the Anaheim Council would have an incentive too to expand in order to bring more business to Anaheim, but we see that doesn't always translate 1-to-1. And the FBI thing, I mean, it did fizzle out, but did get the mayor out too, so that's the other kind of thing that could gum up the works. But apparently,
and then the Olympics coming up too.
Olympics coming up, yeah. According to reports, it is moving forward, and like you said, George, I mean, Olympics might be a big factor as to why that is, and that is good. As far as Florida, what's the phrase? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Sometimes. Limitation could be as much of a driver or fuel as liberation, right?
Yeah.
So, in that way, George, it might get interesting. Now, they did rush a whole bunch of approvals through the prior board because they knew that this was coming. So I think they're going to be good for the next 10, 20 years. But beyond that, now we're looking at, okay, well, now who's going to decide what actually gets built on with the former RCID property.
And honestly, that's still a little bit worrisome, because even if it's for 10 to 20 years, it took 6 years just for them to build Tron. And it's like, if they keep at that speed, I mean, you're only going to be looking at maybe 3, 4 projects tops, depending on if that even takes the amount of time for Tron.
Well, it's what I mean by 10, 20 years. I mean, there's not a limitation in terms of that length of time to build something. It's more about a forward plan.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. So just for clarity, so they could from now to the end of time, they can build a new theme park. And I think they had the approval for 2 water parks and a number of resort hotels. So it's like, they have things in the works. Is what I was just trying to point out.
Which really is true, because of all of what Walt Disney World is now is only 1/4 of the land that they still have available. Yeah, and
that's true. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that the Disney back in the 1970s and late 60s agreed to reservation space. So there's a certain amount of space on property that can only be that has to be used for ecological conservation. So
but I think that did they deduct that, because I do know back in the 90s and early 2000s they would say Walt Disney World was 47 square miles. Now that they say it's 40 square miles. So I wonder if they deducted.
So they annexed Celebration. That contributed to a lot of that parcel. But and they will buy parcels in order to set that aside for ecological conservation, and some of it's not habitable. It's tough. It's
and that was one of Walt's wishes too. So
Yeah,
I am glad that they are, fulfilling that part.
Yeah, they and they very much are. It's to your question, OG. It's not going to be as easy as, well, let's just build it in Florida because we can.
Right.
It's going to be, when can we build and where can we build? It's like where can we get the approvals and where can't we? That's definitely going to be a back and forth, I think, more than ever before. But I don't think we're going to see the full effects of it until the board has some votes on it, until they've gone through all of the projects that they rush through. This story is still unwritten, and this is just the beginning of it.
And these are people that are going to be running this. They have no experience within the theme park industry, correct?
No.
It has to be 3 years, or
I think it's like 2 or 3 years removed from even theme park work.
Right.
They don't want the illusion of impropriety. It's basically what that is.
Yeah, but the whole board is appointed by DeSantis, so it's kind of like, okay, there's no impropriety there, it's just kind of funny.
Well, you're talking about a public official who was actually voted on by the people, right? And you're taking it out of the hands of a corporation. That's where it's a little different. But you're right. I mean, it's so interested parties are now involved. And it's. That's the kind of the difference now. We'll see. We are going to do a show, folks, on that.
We are.
Thing.
We're going to deep dive into this.
We're going to get deep dive into that. But to keep it Anaheim just for a second.
Yeah.
I think Disneyland Forward will go through. I do. When and with what limitations is going to be interesting, because obviously I think do
you both feel it would be under Iger?
Oh,
if
I do.
I think so, yeah.
If Iger then leaves, just to say hypothetically, within like the 2024, 2025, do you think it would still be kind of set in stone that it would be kind of his legacy?
It's been in the works for like 18 months or more already. I can't imagine, like, if they just start the process now, okay, maybe not. It's been kind of that ball's been rolling for a while. I would assume it would be before he leaves, but it's anyone's guess. But I would think so.
It's really interesting because a lot of the tension that was created between Disney and Anaheim occurred in the Iger era. Everybody kind of thinks of Iger as this deal maker and this guy that can get along with folks. And he has his fair share of controversies that people kind of look over.
But here's the thing, though, too. We kind of got on people for blaming Chapes for every park problem when he was CEO.
Sure. No, a lot of it was caused by Michael Calcalazier, for sure. It's just, I'm just saying it was under that admin. You would have thought there would have been some oversight there.
And Daddy Josh too. I'm telling you, this guy. Hey, look, I got nothing against him personally, but this guy, I'm not a huge fan of Daddy Josh in terms of how he's running the parks division. I'm really not. No.
I haven't seen anything yet. I can't even really give an opinion on it until I actually see some sort of movement. Like right now, it seems like it's a bit flatlined since he became chairman of parks.
And we keep hearing from people like Christine Waysigns McCarthy on these earnings calls, give all of the credit to the recent success of the parks division, not to Bob Chapek while he was still there, but to Daddy Josh himself. What are we seeing out in Florida right now with this contract negotiation with the unions and so forth, right? And how contentious that whole negotiation process has become, and the black eyes that Disney has itself inflicted. I mean, it's crazy.
But no one mentions that on to Daddy Josh. That doesn't mention to Daddy Josh. That's like crickets.
No, and
No,
it
but
has
he-
more. I think it has more to do with Daddy Josh too, which is ironic. Fans don't
Absolutely.
even talk
Yeah,
about that. You know?
absolutely.
Absolutely, and if Iger's, if he's talking about accountability, well, it's Josh it's right here. This is the negotiation of a large swath of cast members that actually occupy the Disneyland Resort, and yet you can't actually get this deal done. This is a reflection on his admin, I think. I mean, and how many projects have we seen been approved? How much CapEx have we seen be dedicated? I mean, and we've heard that morale is at its lowest levels, and these operational difficulties still aren't overcome. Let's say, after the parks have reopened, as we assume that they might that they might be with Iger coming back in. The common denominator with all these things is Daddy Josh. Remember, he was the guy that forwarded that letter to WDI saying, "Hey, you got to move to Florida or you don't have a job." Right, and we saw attrition at that division. All the one guy that's been through it all has been Daddy Josh.
Yeah, and honestly, sorry, OG.
Well, I was gonna say, and fans put Chapek through it.
Yes,
through it, and now he's been gone for since November. So December, January, February. We're getting into our 4th month with no Bobby Chapek. And we're still going through some stuff that we saw when Chapek was here. And like you said, Dre, what's the common factor in all that? Daddy Josh. He's now been in right now with Iger and with Bob Chapek.
Yes.
It goes to show you who is really calling the shots the whole time.
Correct.
Not to say Chapek is completely innocent, but I think it's more Daddy Josh than fans want to believe.
I hope we get the apology letters because we were on an island being critical with Daddy Josh and giving Chapek a fair shake. Well, guess what? Chapek's out, and these things still persist. Go ahead.
And I really hate to say that, but he's almost like a fox in sheep's clothing.
He is.
He's very sly. He knows how to work it. He knows he has the face. He has the vocals of how to get an audience's attention, and it's like he can kind of graze past that because he has those qualities, and I think that's where Chapek had it against him because he didn't have those qualities. There's a lot of other things that people didn't like Chapek for, but that's where DeMauro is coming a little bit unscathed because he can schmooze you. Yeah,
he's a chameleon.
He is. And George, we did a show. Dre, you were in California at the time, but George and I did a show a few days ago about this union thing. And I was saying on that show, I'm like, Disney has completely shit the bed on this. I mean, they are making Universal is looking like an angel, right? And it's like not only just like an angel, but Disney looks so outmaneuvered. When Universal came out there and they announced $17 an hour starting base pay the day before the union talks for Disney.
Yes.
And then that's why I'm like, oh, well, Universal, they just announced the day before, 17 an hour, there's no way. Then Disney, just the day after, says we're not even moving, not even $1, not even a dime.
Not even a cent.
Not even a cent. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Correct. And it's bizarre because
they went backwards from their first offer. They were moving backwards.
Universal, without the union problems that Disney has, raised their base pay to $17 an hour, captured all that attention, including maybe even some cast members who were like, okay, well, screw this. I'm just going to go over to Universal and work for them. Disney digs in their heels, make themselves look even worse, and then they announce, well, don't worry, guys, 50% off merch and the Galactic Star Cruiser, so you can go ahead and save your pennies.
It's ridiculous.
In order to pay for a two-night excursion, isn't that fantastic?
It's ridiculous. If they gave them the raise and then announced the discount for the Star Cruiser, absolutely, then it's just gravy, right? It's just gravy,
exactly,
it's extra. But you lead with that after you said they won't get a penny raise. Now, here's the other thing, too, that I think has to be fair, part of this whole equation. Universal's doing a really good job optics-wise. I've said they're crushing Disney on this. Absolutely crushing them.
On multiple fronts.
But I will say this. I think that everyone needs to be a little cautious about this, because while Universal is raising their team members, we don't know what they're doing to the hours, though.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
and
like,
we've heard rumors about this, OG, right?
We have heard rumors, and so it's like those fast food companies, right? Yeah, they'll raise you to 15, but now you're only working 1 day a week. So it's like,
and maybe a position's eliminated in the process.
Right. So, and look, to be fair, Universal might not be doing that. We're hearing stuff, but I haven't really, we can't confirm it, you know? I'm getting a lot of anecdotal stuff like in my YouTube comments, but I don't really know who these people are. I don't want to like run with something I don't really know who it's coming from, right? But I am hearing stuff like that where they are cutting hours. So it's kind of like this optics game where like, yeah, we'll give you 17, but hey, you're only working 2 days a week now. So that's interesting. We got to keep an eye on that. We'll see,
also
you know?
too, the one of the unions, I believe, Local 737, if I'm not mistaken, actually came out and explained, you know, the kind of pay raises and benefits increases that they wanted for various cast members. We all hear about the base pay argument, raising it from 15 as it exists right now. You know, Disney obviously wants to raise that $1. The unions want $3, but we hear about the base pay. But if you look at, you know, what 737 was arguing for, they're arguing for like, you know, $4 for cook twos, and you know, $5 here and $3 here. And it's like quite a bit more,
right?
You know, and this is from like $20 to $24, and you know, it's quite a bit more than it's making it out to be the simplified, truncated version that we hear. You know, all over via the various websites reporting on this.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, it's a much more complicated issue than just you know 18 versus 16, right?
And that's what OG and I were saying in that video. You know, obviously Disney can't give them $30 an hour; that'd be redundant. No. But it's like they were asking for 18, they were at 16, and OG and I just said meet them in the middle, 17.
Well, and that's what Universal exactly did. That's why, in terms of the court of public opinion, nobody allows in the nuance. It's very black and white, right? Which is why I think it's very odd how Disney would kind of play into that and be perceived to be more of the villain in this whole thing. It's just optically, this has been so badly handled and mismanaged, and I do agree with Tom Corliss in that he was suggesting that these stories about 50% off merchandise, 50% off the Galactic Star Cruiser was a way to hide this story or bury the story. Like, for example, if you search cast member Walt Disney World, right? You know, instead of getting stories about the pay negotiations, you get stories about their discounts, right? So it's like it's strategic in that way, I suppose. But goodness gracious, it makes them look bad. I mean, now you have Senator Bernie Sanders talking about it again. I was telling people, I was like, oh my God, I'm living in the Twilight Zone. This is like 2016, 2018 all over again. You know, Iger's the CEO and he's defending the company, I'm sure. And then you have Bernie Sanders actually going out and saying this kind of stuff. It's crazy.
Well, it's crazy. It's crazy. I used to be a total Bernie bro back in 2016, right? I used to love Bernie Sanders. I was all about Bernie, you know, feel the burn, right? And I distinctly remember the public fights that Bernie and Iger had, and Iger going after Bernie, saying like, you know, how many jobs have you created, Bernie, yada, yada, yada. They go back and forth. And it was no secret, Bob Iger was on the Hillary Clinton side of the equation back then.
Of course.
You know, and so it's kind of funny because like, he kind of like, Iger has sort of like repositioned himself as like sort of like this really progressive guy, but just a few years ago he was like a Hillary Clinton fan, and she's not exactly like, you know, I mean, she's not a Bernie Sanders, let me just say that, right, in terms of the progressive scale, you know.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting that evolution that Iger had. Now will he go back kind of being more of a moderate? We'll see. That's kind of the rumors, you know, because we're seeing some stuff with the layoffs and whatever. That's a whole other show. I don't want to get.
That's a whole nother show. Yes. But all this stuff is related, though. All this stuff is interrelated.
It is absolutely. But fellas, thank you so much for coming on today, talking shop. We dove into a lot of DCA stuff, even a little bit of Walt Disney World Union stuff. It was a really, really good time. George, Mr. Family Man 23. I'm going to start with you, sir. If you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. If you want to interact with me, you could do so on Twitter at Disney George. You could also check out the new podcast I'm part of called A Walk with Walt. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There we go. And since you're the Walt Disney World guy, George.
There we go.
I'm manning the roadcaster today, Vash. I got you, brother. I got you.
I do appreciate it. I do love my sound effects. Okay, so yes, if you guys want to go ahead and follow me, you can go do so right there at Vash Sky, just like it's displayed at the bottom of my avatar. Just go ahead and type that in. Should pop up with the actual picture that you're seeing right now. And if you want to, you can go ahead and honestly, I think you should, because look, Orange Grove 55, we have the best bundle of all. OG, do you have that drop there?
Oh, I do have that drop. Go ahead, Walt. Take it away.
And there's the biggest bargain of all.
The biggest bargain of all, for sure, is the OG55 bundle, where we have some amazing shows like Citrus Corner, the original Orange Grove 55 itself, Orange Nerd, Story Geeks with Jay, and my own Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Perfect. And Dre, I was a little late, trying to find it on the caster earlier, but better late than never.
Thank you very much.
There you go. I do appreciate that. I didn't know if you had it still in there, but I'm glad that you did, because yes, I'm not a big Brie Larson fan, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, nah, neither am I. So we're going to be canceled now, I'm sure. But that's okay. We'll be canceled together. I don't care. We'll go down with the ship.
Well, am I saying I hate Brie Larson? No, I'm not.
Yeah, we just don't care for some of the. Yeah, we don't care for her too much. You know?
I know. I was referencing a previous. You know what? It's fine. It's all good. it's all good. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. We're good. Can't wait to see her in Fast 10. It's gonna be great. But I think we talked about a lot, fellas, and I think we definitely have more shows coming. We're definitely going to talk about RCD. We're definitely going to talk about what is it? All things related to Disney right now, especially some of those layoff rumors that we're hearing from some sources right there. I think that would be an interesting discussion and more. So please, you definitely want to go ahead and subscribe. We got a lot of shows in the works, including OG, a review of Super Nintendo World.
Coming up
from some of us OG 55 crew members. I think it'll be very interesting.
That's coming up. We also have some very, very great guests coming up very soon. We have one guest coming up in particular in about a little less than a week that I think everybody at home will definitely know.
And you'll definitely appreciate it. So definitely tune in for that special Orange Grove 55.
Yes, and then we got a great couple coming on the channel very soon as well. I've actually recently found them. They're Disneyland and Universal vloggers. Absolutely love them. I'll just say it. The Enchanted Explorers. They're coming on very soon as well. It's going to be a great time. But a lot of great stuff for everybody. I want to thank you all so much for watching OG55. Comment down below. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.